Welcome to episode 6 of the Speed Secrets podcast with today's guest, Tom Long. Today's main topics are how to climb the career ladder to being a paid factory driver, as well as how to adapt when moving from a production-based car to a purpose-built car with aerodynamic downforce.
Welcome to the Speed Secrets podcast. Join Ross Bentley and guests, drivers, instructors, and coaches, engineers, officials, and others for conversations about high performance and race driving. Listen for tips and advice, thought-provoking ideas, and inspiration to take your own driving to the next level. Green, green, green!
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because today with us is Tom Long, who, among other things, drives the factory Mazda Prototype cars in the IMSA series. And because the show is airing just before the Daytona 24-hour race this weekend, Tom, good luck. I know everybody here listening, myself, we're going to be cheering you guys on. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ross. Looking forward to being on, and looking forward to that Daytona 24 right around the corner.
Yeah, I gotta think that you guys have been preparing a lot. I know with the new car and all that kind of stuff, you guys have had a lot on your plate. So it's going to be fun, I bet, when the green flag drops and you guys can just go racing, right?
Yeah, it's been an incredible amount of work that the whole Mazda team has put in. I think as we speak, they're doing six days a week to get prepared for this event. Just coming off the roar and getting ready for that 24-hour. So
I got to ask, what's it like being one of 4 full-time drivers to drive for Mazda? You're getting paid to drive for a factory effort, knowing that there are hundreds, if not thousands of, honestly, there's like tons of really talented drivers out there who would absolutely love to be in your position, and Mazda selected you. What does that feel like?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think about that all the time. I have to pinch myself for sure. It's a huge honor. It's not without a lot of hard work, but I think everybody in this industry that's really focused is working hard. So it's hard to differentiate yourself in that format that way. But I think what Mazda does specifically is really gives a great path for young drivers coming up through that ladder system, and it's helped me to be able to kind of move up through those ranks, and a lot of great opportunities along the way, a lot of lucky breaks. Knowing the folks and how everything works, and also getting the results on track. So not only on track but off track too. So it's been it's a crazy road, but very privileged to be in it right now.
So I guess in many ways you're kind of almost the poster child for the Mazda Road or Road to 24, right? You've sort of come up through that whole thing, right? And maybe even before Mazda even had the ladder completely, isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think not only myself, but Tristan Nunez is another example who's very young, but started in that same ladder program and was in the prototype lights, the Mazda prototype lights, and moving up through. He even did a year of the prototype challenge. In IMSA, and got some experience there before moving into the GX class, which was with the Mazda 6 for a while. So yeah, for me personally, it's the same scenario, except like you mentioned, a little bit earlier than the official Mazda Road to 24 started. My career was with the Spec Miata and the MX-5 Cup, really before there was a definite here's the next step and here's the scholarship to the next level.
So I guess just walk us kind of through how did you get to where you are today? Like, where did you start, and kind of what were the steps? I guess, what were the steps that got you to where you are?
Well, there was quite a few defining moments. starting out early, got involved in SCCA club racing thanks to my dad. He was a SCCA club racer, hobbyist racer, and so I'd go to the racetrack with him on the weekends, and had a huge affinity for cars and racing, since I was young. And when we were able to share that together, that experience, it was incredible. And we built and worked on the car and tinkered on it together. And, most like I think a lot of other young racers that get that opportunity with their, when it's a kind of a family affair. And soon thereafter realized, that Miata, that Spec Miata stuff is really popular. And so we actually ended up getting rid of what I had as a showroom stock race car and an SCCA and getting the Miata because there was a Pro Series for it, pretty much the precursor to MX-5 Cup. And when that happened, they had the national championship. It was a Pro Series, and the runoff, if you will, was at Petit Le Mans. And in 2005, I was winning the championship and ended up winning the race at Petit Le Mans, and that got me the 2005 championship for MX-5 Cup. And when that happened, it was no defined path like we were talking about with the Mazda Road to Indy. There's no defined path, and the Mazda Road to 24, of course, where to go. So I was scratching my head. Okay, it's time to move up. Just add zeros, as my dad likes to say, right? So,
Right.
So we really didn't know what to do. And Grand Am at the time was a really attractive place to go. Great sports car venue. It was called the Grand Am Cup at the time. And did a couple one-off races with various teams, just trying to learn the ropes and see what it was all about. And very lucky in 2007, actually started in 2006, I met an owner, a team owner that ended up being a guy that I would come work for many years. And that's where Freedom Autosport came about. So he gave me this opportunity to say, hey, I understand your passion and you're very talented. If you want to come work for me and run my race team program, love to have you, and I'll also give you a ride. And really that was what I owe that step from, call it pro-am racing into professional racing was that leap of faith that I got from that opportunity. And with that, was able to turn that into many years of success in the Continental Tire Series, which at that time was sanctioned by Grand Am. And actually before that, it was the Coney Challenge, if you remember that.
Right.
And we were able to win some manufacturer championships along the way. Mazda started to really look hard at that and say, wow, this is a good thing. And they were fortunate enough and kind enough to give me some opportunities with the RX-8 program when it was the Rolex GT series. And I got to drive with Dempsey Racing as probably one of the most unpopular drivers in the paddock at that point, at least to the fans, because I was the fill-in for Patrick Dempsey. So whatever races Patrick couldn't make, that was my cue to jump in. So when fans saw that Tom Long was there, that meant that Patrick was not. So other than the endurance races, where he would of course be there, and I would be a third for the race. And that was actually one of my highlights with Dempsey Racing in my career at this point. Was we were podium finisher in 2011 at the Rolex 24 hour.
Right.
And that was an incredible event. It really was. We led a lot of that race, 14 hours. Porsches were really strong that year, but the Mazda we just kept chugging along and just kind of minded our own business, and it was good. There was some excitement there at the end as well, which always keeps it entertaining. So
and then that kind of led to the opportunities, full time in GT with Mazda, right? And then, which obviously then that whole program kind of turned into the Prototype program. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So from there, in 2013, Mazda was unveiling and announcing the Skyactiv diesel program, which was going to be put in the Mazda 6. And so when Grand Am created this new class called GX, It was only a 1-year class, but we ran and developed that diesel engine in that class. And soon thereafter, Mazda announced that they were going to putting that engine developed into the prototype, into a Lola chassis prototype. And so, with Multimatic's help, we were able to then take that effort forward and start to develop a diesel engine in a prototype in the Premier class, which was then IMSA sports car racing.
In some ways you can kind of go, well, Tom, you just got lucky. You were in the right place at the right time. I mean, how much do you think of where you are today? How much of that is luck, and how much of that is you made that luck happen? And maybe that's a difficult question, but I'd love your.
Sure. Well, I think I mean, certainly I didn't gloss over anything, but I didn't go into a lot of detail with my time at Freedom Autosport. There was a long time there where I was working for that team, which is full time, because I moved away. It was to Tallahassee, Florida, where the team was located, and moved away and lived there for several years. Day in, day out, preparing cars for our club racing efforts, for the pro efforts and all that, and learning the logistics and learning how to run the shop and do all that stuff. And there was a lot of sweat equity involved just to get that ride. And that ride, those first couple of years, wasn't winning races. It was very difficult. It was developing the MX-5, the third generation MX-5, into the Continental Tire Series, and it was, not only developing the car but developing the drivers. So I was co-driving with the team owner, and it was it's a tough task to develop in a 2-driver series where you're coaching and you're trying to focus on your own driving and and keep the team going. It was a tough challenge, but one that I took with both hands and tried to do my best, and we were able to come out with some success from it.
Actually, I think it's an interesting point, because when Mazda went with the prototype car with the diesel engine, I mean, it's not a secret that you guys were developing, and I heard some stories of sort of what went on with developing that engine, and it's incredible stuff that you guys were doing there. But from a guy that was used to winning a lot of races, now you're in a car and a team that you're in full development mode, and you're like, you can't win. And yet, how do you keep yourself motivated? How did you keep yourself motivated to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, knowing that, on a good day, maybe you're gonna be able to wave at the podium?
Right. No, and you're right. It can be tough at times, but there was a lot of inner drive within the team, and that all came from the manufacturer. I feel, that Mazda, the relationship with Japan and Japan looking at our efforts in the U.S. to develop the Skyactiv diesel engine to help them produce a second generation version. So, there was neat things that came along. Like, we were able to find, hey, we're going to triple the power output on this diesel engine, this 2.2 liter diesel engine. And when things breaks, we're going to fix the problem. And then we're going to move on and fix the next thing and fix the next thing. And by the end, of a season, we actually came up with some serious parts that we found, hey, these are without a doubt improvements to this engine. Doesn't matter the power output. And we were able to help put that into back into the assembly process in Japan. And that was so cool, I thought, to be able to work hand in hand with the manufacturer in helping develop their production car engines. And so, now we see those second generation engines in the road cars nowadays. And in fact, in Europe and Japan, diesel engines are more popular for Mazda than they are in the gas engines. In the U.S. this year, we're going to see the first diesel engine finally coming to the U.S. in the CX-5, in the new CX-5. So it's pretty cool to know that, hey, part of those things that Speed Source and Mazda Motorsports developed are in that engine, and that's something that kept us going internally, I think.
So now when you drive down the road and you look over and you go, hey, I helped build that. So that's kind of cool. So, but so if I'm a young driver and I'm, trying to move up in my career here, at what point do I have to make that decision? I go, okay, well, I could be involved with a factory program, which is pretty cool, but it's in full development mode, and the likelihood of winning a lot of races is, it's pretty slim. Versus, if I could go over here, and I don't know whether you had other opportunities, I suspect you had some other opportunities. How do you make that decision? How do you go, okay, I'm going to go and do this rather than I could go over here and maybe it's a little more short term, but I can go and win some races, and that's what I love to do.
Yeah, it's tough, and you're exactly right. It is tough. If you look back, 2013 started the development of that diesel engine, and we ran it all the way through 2015. So 3 years of development in that program, and each year it got better and better, and we were more competitive. In fact, in 2015, we were able to lead the Rolex 24 overall, and that was a huge accomplishment with that program. Who would have thought,
Right.
a little 2.2 liter diesel engine would be able to do such a task and be the first diesel to ever lead and the first Mazda to ever lead overall. So incredible. But now we look, fast forward through 2016 with some success, but 2017 is upon us, and we feel like we're on a very level playing field. Very open as to what opportunities are presenting themselves, and I feel like this is what it's all come down to. This is what we're here for, and this is what I stuck around for. That from 2013 all the way through, is the development process to get to here. And I think now we're finally at the point where we can say, we're on equal footings, and it's going to be the team and the manufacturers that work the hardest that are going to get the results this year. And it's pretty exciting to think about that.
So a lot of young drivers that I coach, there are times where, I say to them, you have to learn how to win. They're fast and they're good drivers and all that kind of stuff, but they just haven't learned how to win, which is putting all the pieces together that you know so well. Can you forget how to do that? Have you forgotten how to win, Tom?
Yeah, that's a good question because, it's funny you say that. I questioned that myself in 2014 because it had been a full year of 2013 development. Hadn't done much outside of that GX program. 2014 came around, and there's this opportunity to race with this retired Marine, Liam Dwyer, and at Lime Rock Park. And it was my first time back in an ST car since 2012. And so, so a year and a half later, I hadn't been in anything where I'm actually, call it racing for the win, if you will. And that race went very well. So I thought, okay, I hadn't forgotten how to do that. That was neat.
And by going very well, meaning you won.
Yeah, we won, and there's a whole story to that as far as it was on Memorial Day weekend, and it was literally within days of what they call an Alive Day, which is when Liam almost lost his life and how he got all the injuries he had. It was a very special moment, and Liam is from Connecticut, so it was even the more special.
Right.
So it was a big deal, but. Then again, in 2015, I had another opportunity to do a couple ST races, street tuner races with Freedom Autosport, and finish 1-2 with the team. So I feel like I haven't had that. Okay, it's time to go win. Since last year, and when we were trying to fight for those, and there was times when things were more even than others, but I think that that's something you never forget. But I'm looking forward to polishing the rust off if there is any come this year.
So, would you recommend that to a driver that's, at that point in their career where, they won a lot early on and now they're in a position where, for whatever reason, the car, the team or whatever is less than competitive enough to win some races? Is it good to kind of go and step and go and try to do some other things where you can keep practicing winning? Is that...
Well, I think in some sense, you bring up a good point because, it's not like you want to drop down to junior varsity and go, beat up on the little guys or something. But I think certainly, as much experience as you can get in many platforms within reason. I mean, you need to stay focused and work your way up, and stay focused on what your goal is, whatever that might be. But yeah, certainly if you can kind of jump across a couple different tiers or different series and hone in on some skills, because we all know as racers that leading the race is much more difficult than running in second. And so putting that pressure on yourself, I think, is a very good thing. Whether it's, in front of the TV, or if it's just a club race or a pro-am race. I think, yeah, absolutely. Having a little bit of pressure on yourself to have to win the race or to do well is not always a bad thing.
So let's take, take your Mazda hat off and, just put yourself, you're advising a young driver right now. I mean, where would you suggest they go? What's some steps? And, obviously this is not like, racing's not like the NFL or something like that, where there is a very, very defined path. There are multiple paths or ladders here, but, what are some of the ways that you would suggest a young driver trying to move up, trying to make a career? Where would you say they should go?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what's a beautiful thing right now is there's so many different avenues and different things you can do. I feel like depending on where their skill sets are right now, if they're just getting into the sport, track time is ever more available than it has been that I can ever think of. So that's a great thing, whether it be track events or whatnot. But in racing specifically, I'm a huge fan. I came up through the Sports Car Club of America. I think they have some great racing opportunities there. If you look at some of the spec classes, some of the momentum classes like a Spec Miata or Spec Racer Ford, or if you're looking on the open wheel side, there's some great open wheel classes available. And those really teach you the fundamentals and the basics of the sport, and also of setup and of racecraft and all these aspects, on top of starting to learn some racetracks, because ultimately that's going to be important. If you look at, for instance, the runoffs being hosted at Daytona a couple of years ago, there's drivers and racers that ran and competed at that runoffs that now, if they had an opportunity to go run at Daytona, they know how the circuit is and the layout, and it's not their first time there. So I think that's important. As they move up, yes, I am biased towards the Mazda stuff, but I really am a true believer in what the MX-5 Cup Series teaches drivers, not only from close racing, 40 cars, all prepped identically, but from a setup standpoint, there's a lot to be valued in. Yes, okay, we can't change the spring rates, which is nice, because now we can really focus on little things like ride heights and damper adjustments and sway bar adjustments, and just little things to keep evolving their skill sets. On the open wheel side, I know there's some great avenues. Of course, USF 2000. I've heard a little bit about the Honda powered F4 series. So I think there's some really good open wheel chassis that you can start your foundation there as well.
This really is it's a tough business, right? It's a tough sport as a paid professional race driver. I mean, I don't know of any other profession in the world where you have to compete for your job with somebody who's willing to pay to do your job. I mean, I'm not going to tell Mazda this, Tom, but there are people that would pay Mazda to drive your prototype car.
Sure.
So, and I talk to a lot of young drivers, and I say, you have to have a hook, something that differentiates yourself from everybody else. And, it can be fairly simple, but, there are some drivers, I think, that are, they've got a strong engineering background, and that helps, or they have a real strong, they're really strong on social media, and, given a choice between a driver that, they're both equally fast, but this one's got a really strong social media following, guess which one the team's going to pick, part of my career was because I could coach drivers as well. And, I actually found out earlier today, well, I've known this for a while, but I found out earlier what your hook is. I was talking to our friend Peter Krause, and he said, and I wrote it down here. He says, Tom Long is the nicest guy in pro racing. And I think that's your hook, isn't it?
That's funny. That's quite a compliment coming from Peter. But
I will say though that you're nice up to a point, because I've seen you go wheel to wheel with somebody, and sometimes you don't look too nice.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think the helmet on versus the helmet off, in fact, it wasn't just Peter that I've heard something like that before, but the team owner that I referred to at Freedom Autosport, he was the same way. And that was part of the differentiator for me, was that coaching. I was able to drive and be able to coach not only a team owner, but others on the team and so forth. And I think, what you do in the car is very important, obviously, but what you do out of the car is, in Mazda's eyes, sometimes even more important. And from that standpoint, I think that's something that, you really need to consider, like you mentioned with the engineering background or social media or just presence in front of the camera or whatever that might be. But what's funny is about Peter's comment, literally, I had a similar story from Derek Whitus, who's that team owner at Freedom Autosport. He said, you seem so nice. And when you're out of the car and everything's fine and everybody's happy and all that, then you put the helmet on and we ask you to do this thing and something else happens. We figure, where did Tom go? Where is this guy? Because you're out for blood at all times. And then within reason, of course, I think you have to have a very level-headed when you're in the car and out of the car. But it's certainly not a bad thing. It doesn't hurt to be nice out of the car and to be easygoing and to get along. But when it's time to get the job done, it's time to get it done.
Yeah, and I've spent a lot of time, and a good friend is Johannes von Overbeck, who you compete against in the prototype cars. And I always said Johannes is one of the most laid back, nicest guys you'll ever meet, until he gets in the car and then he turns into an animal. Don't mess with him, right? So I'm looking forward to you guys going head to head this year, in and out of the car. So that will be fun. So, so what do you say to drivers who say, well, to make it to the top these days, all you need is a bunch of money. You got to buy your way to the top. What's your comment on that?
Well, certainly it doesn't hurt, but with that being said, I think there's alternative ways to do it. There is a lot of luck involved, but the folks and thinking really about the folks and how to network is really important. There's a lot of opportunity out there to be able to get help along the way, whether it's free advice or going to work for free to get experience to then move yourself up. And I feel like, that's kind of what I felt like, that opportunity was for me. There was a bit of time when it was more like an internship and I was just working for trade. And really it ended up being to the point where, I was able to develop enough skill sets by doing all this. There was actually someone would pay you to do that, and so that's kind of where you need to find that balance and always staying involved in the sport. If you don't have a ride that weekend, I don't think you should stay home. I think you should, figure out a way to get out there and be involved. I can think of so many roles personally that I would love to be involved with if I couldn't drive, whether it was from the statistician side or the coaching side or, management, strategy management, different allocations of things. Even I find even fascinating, just like tire prep and the way, all these setup items come together to be perfect. Although I don't have an engineering degree, I love that aspect of it. So all these things, if you're really good at, you develop these skills. It just gives you that many more opportunities to be involved in, to get opportunities. And hey, look at that, he drives too, and you get the opportunity to drive. And look at that, he's really fast. And who knows where that takes you?
And I think actually, if you went down the entry list for Daytona this weekend, and you went down the list and you went, who are all the, if you looked at all the drivers in the prototype class, and you looked at which one of them's, how many of these bought their way there, it's actually a pretty small percentage. I mean, and I don't mean to even take anything away from those who bought their, because guess what? They're still there. They deserve to be there. But I think, I think a lot of people go, well, if you're not born rich, or you've got somebody just paying for the way, you're never going to get there. Well, look at that entry list this weekend, and you go down that list, and I'm going to, a wild guess, it's for sure it's over 80%, and I bet it's more like 90%. The reason they're there is because they've busted their butt, they've worked hard, they were willing to do things for free, they were committed to doing it, and they made a lot of sacrifice, and that's why they're there. So
absolutely. It's funny you say that, because certainly there takes some kind of funding, some level, that you need to start at. There's some kind of foundation that, yes, we all need to get started at, but you can learn off other people, and they're willing to share as long as you put in the time. And when you start to develop those skills, it's amazing what you can learn, and if you're good, how you can put those to good use.
And I think it's amazing how when you show your commitment level, how many people will step up and are willing to help you when that happens. So, and changing gears here, no pun intended, you came from driving production-based cars, and then you got into prototype cars with lots of aerodynamic downforce. What was that like, going from non-aero cars to an aero car that the faster you go, the more grip you've got?
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that, because I find that physics is physics, right? So car dynamics is car dynamics. And yes, there is these caveats to it with downforce and things like that. But really, when you talk about car balance, and you need to differentiate it in a prototype between low speed and high speed per se, because they're different, mechanical grip versus aero grip. But you're going back to the basics of anything you've learned from the beginning. In my production car background of hey, carry as much momentum within reason through the corner to get it squared up to go. And it's the same thing now. Sure, there's some things you have to adjust along the way, but I can think of so many drivers that have come from very low powered, underpowered cars that are now driving high horsepower cars, high downforce cars. And it's because those building blocks, that foundation that those production based, low powered cars can teach you, can move you up through that. It's just kind of piecing it together, and part by part you'll understand and get a lot of help along the way, as we said.
So things like obviously in a production car that does not have aerodynamic downforce, your initial application of the brake pedal is, I'm not going to say it's slow or anything like that, but you kind of get on it and it's fairly constant until you start to bleed off towards the end. In an aero car, that first initial application is just pound the pedal as hard as you can, right? Because the car has got thousands of pounds of downforce at that point, and then you kind of just bleed off the slower the car comes down. Did you have to consciously work on that, or was that something that just felt natural to you, I guess?
It felt somewhat natural, and to be honest, some of the GT cars, some of the style of the GT cars you drove had a little bit of downforce. And I remember that time, the first time driving the RX-8 for Dempsey Racing, and I was impressed how much pedal effort it took. And we were able to left foot brake that car, because just like we do in the prototype, because as long as you blip the downshift, it's a sequential gearbox, it would go down, the lever would go down in the next lower gear. And so I remember, sharing data, looking at data. And one thing that was beautiful at Mazda was we shared amongst all the teams. So the Speed Source drivers shared with the Dempsey Racing drivers, shared with all the teams. And I remember looking at a couple brake traces from the more experienced drivers on other teams and saw, hey, they really pound the brake pedal. They spike that brake pedal. Of course, we got to get the brake balance right, the brake bias to do that. But they do that, and then they just are real crisp and deliberate on the blips to get the downshifts done. And so, as you asked, just learning a little bit along the way and kind of being able to say, yep, okay, I know the data, so I can just kind of overlay my data and see, okay, that's what I need to do, and I'll start to go do it. And then it becomes a second nature, a feel thing. And I know Sylvain Tremblay always loves to poke at me about this. He says, yeah, we'll be looking at data, and and I might have some good brake performance as we overlay the data amongst some guys. And he's like, yeah, not bad for a Spec Miata guy. So
So you're saying that driving a Spec Miata is not a bad thing, right? And I agree 1,000%. I mean, driving a car at the limit is driving a car at the limit, right? And it's having that ability to sense that. Yeah. Have you ever had though, when you got into the prototype car with more downforce, did you ever get one of those corners that it's a really fast corner and the downforce and you're going, I'm not sure I can believe that this thing can actually stick. Have you had that? Because I remember first time driving an Indy car on an oval track, I'm going, I'm not sure this is possible, but you kind of go back to physics is physics. Well, physics at first doesn't seem like it should work. So did you ever have that experience?
Oh, absolutely. Specifically, I can think of going to Canadian Tire Motorsports Park and thinking about, being flat through turn one, almost flat through turn two. It was like your inclination is to touch the brake as you come, before you come over the crest of turn two, not necessarily just like not even come all the way off the throttle, right? It just feels like the front's going to just take off and sail into the trees. And that's even now where they've got it all paved, where I know in the years past it was all concrete there. So yeah, I mean that absolutely, it's a little bit of mind over matter, but the I think the thing that it comes back to that helps me at least is, you've got some great teammates and you can say, hey, look at what they're doing there and look what I'm doing here. And you put it together and you say, my gosh, that theoretical lap, that's something. And then you go chase it, and then you put it together and you say, okay, well, hey, you're doing a great job there. And wow, we can learn something. We can break a little later there. And it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I think as a driver, if someone tells you in a very confident way, hey, this is possible, you can do this, like for instance the oval situation, there's drivers that are doing this, the car is set up well, and it's like, all right, we're going to go do it. And it's not just beating your chest being brave, but you can put your mind to it and get the feel of it so it feels right and you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I heard stories of guys at Indy, taking their left foot and putting it over on top of their right foot to push down on the throttle, so their right foot wouldn't lift. Yeah, I never did that, but I was tempted to. Yeah,
I'll have to ask James Hinchcliffe when I see him if he did that to put it on the pole this year or last year at the Indy 500. So.
Man, that was magic. That could not have been better. So yeah, and that's cool that you got James in your car this weekend. So well, two last questions. One is, hey, I'm going to the track this weekend. I'm a track day guy. I've been doing this for 2 years. What advice have you got for me?
Oh, wow. I love working with those drivers. They're so much fun. I mean, kind of the world is your oyster when it comes to driving from that standpoint. Really, I would ask at that 2 year mark, what are you doing as far as what level are you at? Are you approved solo driver? Are you still having somebody in the right seat with you, or you receiving any coaching, right? And I guess that. Because at that point, what I find is that I tend to work with drivers that said, "Yep, I'm solo, I'm all set. I'm starting to develop my car, and I've got some good skill sets." But they really start to plateau on their learning, and they've been approved solo, and they're not receiving any more feedback on how to get to that next level, and they almost sometimes can start to create some bad habits. And self-admittedly, they'll admit that sometimes. Wow, I've been doing this way, and I don't know why. And so I think that's the advice I would give is if they're been soloed on their own for a while, fantastic, keep it up, keep developing, but always go back every once in a while and get some help, get some coaching, so that way you can continue to develop not only get faster, but also make sure that you don't have any bad habits.
Yeah, great point. Great point. So, one last question. Daytona this weekend. Take your PR hat or your no PR answer here. How are you going to do?
I tell you, if the mantra around Mazda is never stop challenging. I tell you, that's what our guys have been doing. Just the incredible amount of work they've been putting in. I think if hard work and effort has anything to do with it, we're going to do really well. I'm excited for the pace that the cars are running. I'm excited for all the DPI chassis and the P2 cars that are out there. I think it's gonna be a really good race. But as we know, any 24-hour race, it's all about attrition. This is going to be a survival of the fittest because it's a lot of new hardware out there. It's going to be really interesting to see what everybody has learned or hasn't learned yet.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think with the new class or the new cars and everything, it's going to be interesting to see, and I think attrition is going to be a part of it. But I know that everybody's going to be cheering you on here. So good luck this weekend. How can people, I guess, first of all, follow you and connect with you? Website, social media, whatever, and how can they kind of follow Mazda this weekend?
Yeah, thanks first off, Ross, for having me on. This has been a true pleasure. But yeah, absolutely can follow me at Tom Long Racing on Twitter, and that is also my website there. Try to keep that updated throughout the events. You can kind of follow along. And also from Mazda's standpoint, Mazda Racing in Twitter and in Facebook, they do a good job of keeping it updated almost by the minute.
Right. And by the way, I love your blog posts on your website. So I'm going to put links to that in the show notes for this, so people can find them there. So.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for being on the show, Tom. And again, good luck and have fun this weekend at Daytona and throughout the season. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you.
Time for another quick speed secret. A short reminder that I hope will stick in your mind and be useful the next time you're on track. So here's today's tip. Surround yourself with the right people and your career will look after itself. I spent years chasing sponsorship to pay for my racing. I worked nonstop at putting proposals together, making sponsorship pitches, learning about motorsport marketing, trying to sell sponsorships, and on and on and on and on. It was worth it. It was a great learning experience. But the second I switched my focus to surrounding myself with great people, to networking, building a team around me, my career changed. I got to race Indy cars, and then I got paid to drive Prototype and GT sports cars. Now, you can't just ask people to support you. You need to inspire them to want to help you. Be authentic, be good to people, provide them with value, something in return, and inspire them with your passion to be the very best driver you can be. If you'd like more tips, advice, and resources, check out my website at speedsecrets.com. And if you liked what you heard today, please subscribe to the Speed Secrets podcast. And even better, leave a review on iTunes. I'd really appreciate that. And share it with friends. Hey, keep learning and having fun.